This is Shawn Crystal. Catch the Inkpulp podcast on Pharcyde TV Wednesdays at noon Pacific time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. Come hang. Peace. This is the Inkpulp podcast. This is the Inkpulp podcast. Comics, hip hop, life. Welcome to the Inkpulp podcast. I'm your lovely host, Shawn Crystal. Thank you for tuning in again. If you're a repeat tuner-inner, if you're new to this podcast, thank you for listening. Please take a minute to head on over to Pharcyde TV on YouTube and subscribe over there. Or if you're on Twitch, do what you gotta do over there. Or Mixcloud, do what you gotta do over there. Or go to PharcydeTV.com. They stream these episodes. I premiere the episodes on their streaming platforms. Then I release them on my platforms. So if you go to youtube.com/Inkpulp and hit subscribe, and if you're watching it, wherever you're watching it, hit like, comment. And when this is live, I've been real diligent about on Wednesdays being a part of the live stream. So I'm there in the chat room if you got any questions. On my channel, subscribe, like, comment, do all that good stuff. Trying to build our followers. Trying to grow this stuff. And then follow me on all my social media platforms at Inkpulp. Instagram, Twitter. You got a Facebook page and TikTok, although I'm not terribly active there. I'm still not sure what I'm doing on there. I'm an old man on TikTok. What can I say? Yeah, thank you. Welcome back. I'm going to talk a little bit about balance today because it's an area I'm not proficient in. I tend to overload myself with, I don't like to call it work because it is in the, pure definition sense, but my work is my passion, it's my love, it's my joy. And I tend to take on too much, and I think that just comes from ambition. I have a lot I want to do, and where I am in life, I had a lot I was hoping I would have accomplished by now, so it's kind of created this backlog of stuff I still want to do, and I just kind of get lost, like in the forest. Can't see the forest of the trees. Just constantly burying myself for a brighter future when I can chill more, when I can work at a more reasonable pace. But what I am aware of and what I'm learning and what I'm really trying to be better at is, instead of living for a dream life in the future, live that way now. And honestly, some downtime, some time to decompress only makes you perform better now, makes your art stronger now. And that's an abstract thought. I mean, I was just raised to think, work hard, and you'll succeed. And there's something to be said for downtime. And that's something I'm really working on, and I'm really not good on it. But what I realize is, like, you have a certain amount of mental space. It's like, this is your hard drive. And when I'm working on a project, my gray matter is working shit out when I'm not hands-on. So if I'm working on a project, like say the one with the Pharcyde, when I'm at the gym or when I'm laying down at night about to fall asleep, my gray matter is just kind of working out some problems. But then I've got this instructional, like how to draw comics video line I'm launching, or I guess, yeah, when this comes out, I'll be launching it very shortly after. And that's called Inkpulp Instruction. And that's a big business thing for me. I mean, I want to grow that thing to be massive. And the Pharcyde project's growing to be massive. So then my hard drive is starting to get clogged and things stop working. It's like gears start grinding to a slower speed. And I start to feel this frustration, and it took me decades to figure out what this frustration is, and it's that there's too much going on. Then on top of that, I'm starting another dream project, this time Killer Mike and Cuz Lightyear, and that's another massive undertaking. These 3 projects are my dreams come true, and these 3 projects are my future. So now I've got all 3 of them gumming me up, and I'm not taking the downtime I need, and it's creating a fuzz where I'm usually very focused. When I come into the studio during the day, it's a lot of scrambling to keep everything afloat and really not getting a feel that I'm taking them one at a time and getting them, like, working them out healthy and putting them back. It's more panicky, and that's not a good place to work from. So I know my weakness here, and this is what I got to work on. I know I talk a lot about, trying to uplift and move forward and strengths and successes I've had, but I think it's important today to talk about where I'm not succeeding and where I need to succeed. So you can see my thought process and how I need to learn to hold myself more accountable for these things. But I do have that grind mentality, like just go, 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 and muscle through everything. But there is a severe downside to that. You will break. You have to be strategic in your energy use, and you have to place your energies in proper areas. So, balance. See? Balance. Gotta remind myself. Alright, enough about that. And, leave a comment down below. Let's talk about this shit. And also, this is another big thing on that. So when my balance is out of whack, my frequency, which vibes high, I'm talking about that, dips. That's really bad. That's really bad. So just by taking some downtime, you can keep your frequency vibing high. That's the key. That's the key. Alright, so today on the Inkpulp podcast, we have my man Jim Mahfood, as always. Kind of like my co-host. Jim comes on when he can, and every time he does, I feel like he adds so much to the show, and the show is just better with him. No doubt. No doubt at all. He brings a lot to the table, and we have a good time. And then Alan. I know, like, a few of you have been noticing, like, I'll like make a mental note for Alan, like, not a mental note, but I'll make a note, like, Alan, right here, drop this in. And he doesn't always do it. Well, here's the thing. Alan's a busy man, just like myself. I mean, he's got a full-time teaching gig, and he's also very involved in my Inkpulp instruction business. We're kind of partners in that. And he's got a bunch of projects of his own. He's of the same ilk as me. I mean, he just overloads himself. So this podcast is another thing he does with me. It doesn't make us money, but he puts a lot of time into it. So he, at times, will just, not listen to the whole episode and just put it through the system and let it do its work, and it's playing in the background while he's working, and he might not pick up on everything. So be easy on Alan, because without him, this doesn't happen. So much love and respect, Alan. So we got Mahfood. Alan's always involved. And today we got Jim Rugg. Jim Rugg is a fellow comic book artist, someone who's been very inspiring to me as of late. As you know, I've really switched my mind to being a completely independent artist, and I'm paying much more attention to those artists that have been successful at that and learning from them, and Jim is one of them. And he just had a Kickstarter for his book called Octobrion, And we talk about that today, and we're drawing Octobrion. I don't want to say much more about Octobrion, but you can get copies. I highly recommend it. It's the first black light comic ever made. It's kind of cool. So check that out. I got nothing else for you people. I think we're good. I know we've got a killer episode today, so sit back, kick back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the Inkpulp podcast. And keep your eyes peeled. Inkpulp instruction. Probably within a week or two from you hearing this, it's going to be all over the place. My Indiegogo campaign for the first video. I'll say more. Just follow me on social media. All the teasers, all the explanations, everything will be there. It's going to be gangster shit. So thanks again. Enjoy. Peace. Yeah, this post office thing is going to be a mess. Although, Jim, I will, both of you guys, your books arrived bright and early, easily. I had no problem with them. So, I mean,
this is going to be so confusing when you're like, Jim.
Yeah, I'm typing emails. I'm like, Jim, wait a minute. Yeah. I'm going to have to call you Food One.
That's fine. But yeah, I FedExed Cam, this guy who's helping me with my art dealer. I FedExed him original art yesterday because I didn't want to risk using the post office for international original art shipping. Like,
yeah,
at this point, this might not go out. It might get lost somewhere. So I'm just going to use FedEx and assume that that's more.
Yeah. I think you're totally safe with that. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we were talking about Jim, you having the mailing operation home.
That's exactly what Jason's been doing. He's running carloads over to the post office every day. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't know what I would do differently like next time. You know, the Kickstarter was it's been very smooth. It's worked really well, and I feel like it allows me to kind of make anything I can think of making. But the fulfillment part, you know, like I wouldn't fulfill another one myself. Certainly not on this scale. But I don't know what the alternative is. Like I looked at fulfillment services, and they're they're pretty costly. Like I think it would work if the object were bigger or the orders were less complex. Because I ended up with, I think, 230 different combinations of things. Like,
shit.
Yeah.
Could you hire like a minimum wage, like intern? I mean, now's not the time to be doing that, obviously, but I guess in the future you could for me, like I'd probably pay my kids like a certain wage to just pack shit up.
I think that's probably the way I would do it. You know, so I was still kind of like near the operation and could interact with whoever's doing it, and just hire, you know, whoever, friends that are in between jobs or, you know, relatives or something like that for a few days. That's probably what I would try next time. Again, assuming that you can have people like working closally with you and stuff too.
I know. It's madness.
You have to have your own like COVID test of people that show up.
Right.
Scanning temperatures as they come in.
Yeah, that may be that might be necessary for a while.
Yeah,
I just got lucky with like our pop-up book because my buddy Ross, who owns Proposition Press, he handles the distribution of the book through our Kickstarter. So it's like he has a house in Colorado set up with like the garage and the basement with just tables, and he's assembling these packages with the help of other people, and it's actually like an operation out of his house, man. It's like fully happening.
Let's plug your book here, Jim. Pop Up Funk. This book is awesome.
That's amazing.
Ridiculous.
Dude, that is so cool.
Yeah, thank you. And
did you print extras? Like, can people order them?
Yeah, you can still get it at popupfunk.com. And yeah, we'll also ship it directly out to people. So we definitely overprinted, but we overprinted thinking that there was going to be conventions. And
yeah, I know.
I don't know when that'll happen again, but it's like, well, we still have books that people can buy to the website. So if you missed the Kickstarter, though, you had all the incentives of like you get all the extra like, goodies and stuff like that.
Yeah. The shirt I got was red too. And Jim, what about Jim Rugg? Your book, Octobrion? You printed extras, I assume, and is Ad House putting those out?
Yeah, they'll be coming out even like through comic book shops relatively soon. Like they're available to order right now through comic shops to pre-order. I don't think I'm selling them anywhere online at the moment because I am in the middle of fulfillment. But once I send everything out to the Kickstarter backers, whatever's left over, then I'll put up online. But they're going to go through comic shops and stuff. If people miss Kickstarter or if they don't want to use Kickstarter for whatever reason, they'll be able to get them wherever they get comics normally.
All right, cool.
That's awesome. So Chris at Ad House did that through Diamond.
Yes.
Okay. That's awesome.
All right,
you don't upset retailers. I mean, not that they would be upset, but you know what I mean? It's like a weird thing of making a new comic, and then sometimes retailers are like, so we don't get the book, or how does this work?
Yeah, I don't know if it's like the circumstances. I haven't heard anything from retailers to that effect, but it could be because they have bigger fish to fry at the moment. Several retailers reached out to me though, because a lot of Kickstarters will have that retailer level where
I was going to ask you about that. Yeah.
And I have lots of friends that run comic shops, so I talked to them about what they would want in a Kickstarter, like a retailer level package or whatever. And they weren't that keen on it, period. And, like once you start offering these discounts on Kickstarter, like Kickstarter's taking a cut, you're paying for shipping. Right. It gets really thin, the margins there. And so that's why we're running it through Diamond. Like after talking to some stores, that seemed like the best solution to everyone. And also there are several retailers that we're just dealing with directly. Like if they reached out to me during the Kickstarter, I was like, all right, we'll sell to you directly, like outside of the Kickstarter or outside of Diamond, whatever works for the store. Because I mean, I love comic book shops. I'm a comic book nerd. So it's basically whatever I can do to get it into comic shops, I'll do, whether that's like retailer direct or through Diamond or, whatever works for everybody. I'm pretty flexible on that. Chris is flexible at Ad House. And there, retailers, you've been in comic shops. A lot of comic shops aren't really interested in indie comics anyway, or they don't stock indie comics. So it's not like that applies to every comic shop either. It's kind of a small percentage of comic shops that want this, and we'll work with them. We'll meet them wherever it makes sense, right, for them. All right. So far so good. It's I've heard from a few comic shop retailers, and it's all been positive, but. I don't know. I'm not under the impression, it's such a small group that has access even to like a local comic shop. I don't know that Kickstarter is necessarily cannibalizing their sales. I think that we underestimate how many people are interested in comics. And like I grew up without access to a comic shop, like lots of people don't have comic shops nearby. So I think there's a big audience out there for this kind of work. And, you kind of have to do that legwork to try to reach that audience all over the place, and Kickstarter is just one more outlet for that, I think.
Yeah,
I agree. I'm noticing and feeling like more and more these crowdfunding sites are as much of a marketing tool as they are a sales tool. Like
that's definitely the way I looked at it.
Yeah, that's how I'm looking at it too for stuff I got going on. All right, so let's do this. You guys want to switch over to the art jam session of this, and we'll keep the talk going?
Yeah,
sounds good.
All right, so today we have Jim Rugg on, obviously, and my man Mahfood, but we're going to be drawing Octobrion from Jim Rugg's comic, Octobrion. So let me switch over to mine. I've already started my painting of her.
You're a cheater, Shawn.
Dude, oh, man. I'm not going to get it done during the show. So. But, yeah, I've got plans. I've got plans for this.
Nice.
And, Jim, you're starting scrap. Both Jims, or Jim Rugg, you have a pencil drawing done, correct?
I did,
God, that's awesome. She's with a walrus?
She is, yeah.
That's
one of the one of the original Octobriana stories, she fights like a giant radiated walrus, mutated giant walrus. So
Right.
kind of like I like drawing walruses anyway, and this is a good excuse for it.
That's awesome, man.
All right. So on that note, Jim Rugg, tell us the origins of inspiration for Octobriana.
Well, it's two parts. One is the blacklight part, and maybe we'll come back to that. And the other part is the character, and she's been around for, I think there was a book published in 1971 called Octobriana and the Russian Underground.
Oh, that was real?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a real thing, dude.
I thought you built this whole like fictional backstory.
No, it's a real thing, and it's kind of fantastic because it's almost a history book. It's mostly text about this character that's supposed to be an underground Russian, like dissidents were making this character and making illegal comic books about her. And it's a hoax, it's not real, but it made her a public domain character, and so people have been using her in comics ever since, starting with like Brian Talbot. And so she's just she's the spirit of revolution.
Oh,
and that it just lent itself to a lot of my interest. I like these kind of like weird characters. She's a superhero that we get to play with, unlike say Spider-Man or Batman or something like that, because she's in the public domain.
Right.
And it kind of goes from there. The other part of it is the blacklight part, and I had made blacklight screen prints, and I thought I could do this as a comic, kind of using a similar approach with the color, and I just needed the right project. And so I wanted something in the 70s like blacklight stuff, and I was reading that book at the right time, and it just all kind of clicked for me.
It's perfect, man. And also, Jim, with some of the just visual stuff I've seen you doing from the book, the interiors and stuff, it looks like Spain Rodriguez and Trash Man. I know you guys have done videos about him on Kayfabe. That seems to be a pretty big influence on this as well.
Yeah, that's a good call. I'm a big fan of his work too, and it does line up very well. Like that's what I was thinking of, where if the American underground cartoonists got hold of Octobrion and the Russian underground in the 70s, that this would be their response, like to support their fellow cartoonist, underground cartoonist in Russia. They would do their own Octobriana here in the States, and that all went into like the head shops and the black lights and the underground cartoonists like Spain.
Definitely. I just got this one last week, dude. Subvert Comics issue 2. It's a second printing, but I have all the Trash Man stuff collected through Fantagraphics, but I've been finding some of the individual issues of Subvert out here. Portland has like really, really good comic shops for back issues. So I kind of want, I'm on this thing of like, I just want the individual issues as well. Because they've got
something really cool about those, like having the real paper and everything.
Yeah.
Guys, real quick, just back up 1 second. Educate me a little bit and maybe some of the audience on Subvert Comics.
Jim, do you want to take that?
Yeah. Subvert Comics was Spain Rodriguez's underground comic. So, like some of these bigger underground cartoonists had their own titles that were, a lot of them were anthologies, but some of them had their own titles that were their own characters. And Subvert Comics was his character, Trash Man, that was like a revolutionary underground, weirdly almost like part superhero, but clearly in the underground political sense of the word. And another revolutionary character, much like Octobriana. It'd be a perfect team up, those two, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think 3 issues were published, but there's also a Trash Man tabloid-sized newsprint collection. And some of those comics are original for the comics, and then some of them are collected from anthologies where it would appear, like the East Village. I think the East Village Other is where those used to run. We've covered a lot of this on Cartoonist Kayfabe, believe it or not.
Yeah.
But these comics have like quite a history for that kind of thing, and they were pretty widely seen because they would appear in these like tabloid newspapers. Like people would pick them up for the news part, for the articles, and there would be these underground comic strips. So they were pretty widely seen.
What you guys are talking about?
Yeah, mostly the 70s.
Yeah, early 70s, Shawn. I think this issue is like 72.
Okay.
Awesome.
And then Jim Rugg, real quick, just for some, I mean, I doubt this is the case, but for anyone who may not know that listens to this, talk about kayfabe real quick and let them know what that is. Your podcast.
Kayfabe, Cartoonist Kayfabe is my YouTube channel that I do with another cartoonist here in Pittsburgh, Ed Piskor. And it's just basically all comics, all the stuff that we love, the comics that we make. We talk about, process stuff. We talk about comics history, and we've started interviewing people. So we've talked to people like Dave Gibbons. Jim Mahfood's been on talking about his trip to Japan. It's basically our love of comics. And of course, there's a lot we love about comics. So it covers a pretty wide set of topics and books. And it goes from we started out talking about Wizard Magazine in the 90s. And so there's a lot of 90s comics talk, but there's other stuff too, like underground coverage, manga, you name it. We probably covered something close to it.
And your guys' passion and excitement for comics is obviously contagious because the podcast is wildly successful.
It's going well, and we hear from a lot of pros and stuff, which is awesome. So we've had a chance to talk to all kinds of different people, like Brendan McCarthy we talked to early on.
That one was amazing, man. I love that.
And Mahfood,
it's really fun.
We're really enjoying the Bakshi one.
Oh yeah, he was incredible, man. We weren't sure what to expect from him. I think he's 80, and he was just sharp.
He had a lot of life in him. Yeah, he was very animated.
Well, Jim, John Gibson from I Am 8-Bit, right?
Yes.
Obviously. Him and Chris, I can't remember Chris's last name, from the original Meat House crew.
Oh yeah,
they did the Ralph Bakshi art book. They wrote, and I remember John telling me at the time, Bakshi was pretty much a handful to deal with putting that book together. It was it became a deadly game of cat and mouse, just kind of dealing with him and getting him to sign off on things. And the book is incredible, but John was like, dude, we put so much fucking work into this, and having to deal with Ralph, and he's kind of a high maintenance guy, but he's obviously a genius and a pop culture figure, basically a legend in a way. So but I know those guys had to put in their work, man, putting that book together.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, dude, for us growing up, I remember discovering those movies that to see that cartoons could be made for adults like that was just life-changing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was fantastic. It doesn't surprise me that he would be demanding to work with or for. But I also get real inspired by that. That's a guy who did things his way and just
right.
Got it done. You hear so many horror stories about how hard it is to produce something feature animation for adults. Who else has even done anything like that? So, to do that kind of work your way, I just find that hugely inspirational.
For sure.
I agree, for sure.
Yeah, he was completely ahead of his time with basically everything he was doing, and that was fantastic. Man, I started watching the videos, not to brag, but with the very first video you guys dropped, just because I know you guys, I consider you guys friends. I love your work, and I just thought it was going to be, I knew it was going to be interesting and funny to revisit Wizard Magazine through your lens. And then I quickly discovered what your ulterior motives were with okay, this isn't just going to be about Wizard now. We're going to branch off and do other, videos. And then the interviews started. And then once you guys got the McFarlane interview, I feel like that was kind of maybe the breakthrough moment of
now this is transcended into we're representing like comic books as a full-blown art form and what the medium can be, and like interviewing the top dogs, and the reason why the channel started, one of the reasons is because of McFarlane and those guys in a way.
Yeah, and you know, those guys have a lot in common with somebody like a Ralph Bakshi too, because I just am inspired by whoever goes off and does their own thing.
Sure.
You know, whether it's changing the system or, you know, finding a new way to make the system work for them, and those Image guys, man, you know, they certainly did. Like, whatever you may think of their work, they certainly changed the business quite a bit, and it was because they weren't happy with the way things were. You know, they wanted more out of it, and it's like they got it, like it worked. You know,
right?
I'm sure that wasn't an easy thing for them, but from my seat, you know, that changed my whole dreams, what I wanted to do. Because up to that point, I just wanted to, you know, draw Wolverine or something. And at that point, it was like, figure out your own characters. You know, like then I wanted to make my own characters, my own book. It really, like it literally changed my dreams, you know, the idea of those guys making their own stuff.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I think that's definitely the case for me, but it wasn't. I mean, the Image guys were exciting, and I followed them and loved what they were doing. I think for me, it was more like seeing what Frank Miller go off and do that, and Mignola do that too.
Yeah, I was reading, like, Miller was my favorite guy back then.
Me too.
And I started reading when he was in, you know, when he wasn't really doing comics there for a couple years, I guess, whenever he was like screenwriting and stuff. And when he came back to Sin City, I mean, that was my favorite thing on earth for a long time.
Me too. That rocked me. That just, I remember, like, and I talked to Shrek about this once, but I remember walking into the comic shop, and this is like Image era with all that new digital coloring, airbrushed, over-rendered, like just chaos. And amongst the shelves of all this color, there was like the most, it just popped right out. Sin City, stark black and white, simple graphic, easy to read. It affected me as an artist. From that point on, clarity, just like good graphic design and the importance of clarity was really understood to me.
Definitely.
And
I also like that he lettered that stuff himself, and it had like a roughness to it.
Yeah.
That just gave me permission to, I don't know, keep doing the stuff I was doing, you know, because like my sketchbooks didn't look like a Marvel comic or something, or an Image comic or anything that was all polished and, you know, computer color and perfect. But when I saw those Sin City pages, it was like, oh man, the lettering's a little bit, you know, it didn't look like a regular comic, or at least what I was used to at that point. And it was really, you know, like I said, it was like permission to make comics that look like this, you know, letter them yourself. Don't worry about it.
Right. All right, Jim Rugg. I keep having to call your last name out because I got two Jims. So let's talk about the blacklight aspect of Octobrion. What made you want to explore doing the blacklight stuff?
I made I make a lot of different stuff. So like I made some screen prints.
Right.
I can't remember what year it was, but they were blacklight screen prints. You know, it was like somebody had given me a chance to do a screen print, and they're like, you can do, you know, whatever ink you want and stuff. And you realize like the blacklight is just, it's fluorescent ink is pretty much the secret to the blacklight. And so that's what I did. And whenever the prints came back from the printer, I was amazed by the color. Like it was the greatest color I think I'd ever seen on anything. And so, you know, like my first idea then, of course, is make a comic with this. And it was purely because, you know, like I color my own comics and stuff. So I'm always looking at palettes and, you know, thinking of whatever looks good, you know, color wise. And as soon as I saw those fluorescent inks, man, I fell in love. And it was just a matter of like, find some way to do this in a comic. And the more I researched it, no, you know, like I figured there would be underground comics that were printed that way. I couldn't find any, you know, like nobody really had done it. And so that's even better, you know, get to do it first is like, all right.
Yeah, I was going to ask if that excited you even more.
Oh man, that's my favorite stuff in the world is whenever I decide I want something and I can't find it, it's the perfect thing. Cause then it's like, make it yourself.
Definitely. And that was such a great way of like, I don't want to say like sales pitch, but it's also like being able to tag your Kickstarter and your post with the phrasing, world's first blacklight comic.
Right.
That's a huge deal. That's great. That's just, not to be the business guy, but that's like just great marketing.
I think Jim Mahfood, you've always been smart with the business, and I learned a lot from you. So I think it's good to talk about that stuff and think about that stuff. But yeah, that's a great marketing tool to have for sure.
Yeah. It factors in when you're making your own stuff, obviously. And it's
right.
With like the pop-up book, I was calling it this just straight braggadocio, but just like the world's greatest pop-up book or the world's greatest psychedelic pop-up book. And it probably isn't the world's greatest pop-up book, but fuck it. Like for younger fans of mine who don't know or don't collect pop-up books, like it is then. Like, who cares? It's just a way of like letting people know that you're confident in the product you're putting out. It's something new. It's something different. Why not hype it up that way?
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Like so many cartoonists, we kind of sit around with our heads down mumbling or whatever. And it's like, if you look around at how other things are sold, movies, whatever it is, you kind of have to put on that salesman hat. It's how you get the word out.
And Jim, like how much have things changed just this year alone with obviously, what's going on, no conventions, whatever. It's like cartoonists now more than ever are being forced to turn themselves into somewhat outgoing, charismatic people that can go online, make videos, post on social media, and be interesting, be unique, but then still have to deliver the goods as far as making the artwork, the product, the comics. Now you have to be like a guy that can also make videos and be interesting and charismatic. And I think that's got some cartoonists in a panic. And I understand why. I think all of us here are good. I know Eddie P is good. Cartoonist Kayfabe is good. Scotty Young is good.
Oh, Scotty.
But there are certain people that are just like, yeah, I can't become like a personality now and have to make videos and all this other shit. Like I'm barely getting my work done every day in my studio. Now I'm supposed to go out and buy mics and cameras and all this shit. Like this is a whole new.
Right.
It's like a whole new era we're entering now.
I think it's offering people like us a new tool to use. I don't know that I'd say it's essential. It's certainly like effective, and if you're comfortable with it, it's like to do this. Like I'd be in here drawing anyway, but to talk to you guys while we're drawing, it's easy to incorporate into my daily stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I guess one reason I was hoping to get Jim Rugg on and also reached out to Ed is like I've been trying to figure out how to survive financially while getting out of the freelance world and into the independent world where I feel more comfortable and more interested in working in. And I mean, Mahfood, you've been a big, I've told you this, you've been a big help and a big inspiration. I've learned a lot from you, but I'm interested in learning more and more of how people do this. So that's kind of an ulterior motive to having Jim Rugg on today, was to talk about that stuff. But so Jim Rugg, you're so Octobrion is the newest thing you've done, and that was a successful Kickstarter. To me, it seemed like a really successful Kickstarter.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
What were your expectations going in?
I try to keep it pretty open because it's the first time I've done a Kickstarter. So, part of the reason that I worked with Ad House Books was a lot of the stuff I do, it's like, it's going to happen regardless of whether, you know, like the Kickstarter works or whatever. Like this book was going to get made. And I try to kind of like, you know, not be dependent on it. So if it doesn't work well, I wouldn't be in trouble.
Right.
You know, and like everything you're saying, Shawn, I agree with, you know, in terms of like cartoonists making these transitions, promoting themselves, figuring out how to promote themselves, learning to make videos if that's the direction they go. And I kind of approached the Kickstarter the same way. Like it was something new for me. I love doing new stuff anyway. And it's something that I've wanted to do for like 10 years. So I didn't really know what to expect from it. I think my goal was like $5,000 was my initial goal for it. And we ended up doing, I think, around 95,000.
Yeah.
Amazing, man.
Amazing.
And I made mistakes. Like I accidentally launched it 10 days earlier than I planned on launching it because I'm stupid, or, you know, like technologically I'm challenged, like a lot of probably older cartoonists feel.
So you hit the launch button by accident?
Well, there was an approval thing. I thought I needed to do it to like get it set up so I could send out previews to some of the people that, you know, like I'm talking to about it, and I wanted them to kind of look at it. And I thought that's what I was doing, but it actually went live early. And there were things that I wasn't ready for. So I just, you know, I decided to leave it live and just continue doing all the preparation stuff that I had planned to do anyway. And, you know, so there were these little things that kind of went wrong, but ultimately worked out in the end. But any of this stuff, like I just try to keep an open mind as much as possible and look at it almost like you get a new brush or something and you're just going to play with it. And that was a lot of what Kickstarter was for me. Like I said, I've been wanting to do it because it was new distribution model, just something new to try. And I didn't have the right project until this time. So that's kind of how I approach all this stuff, including the video. Like whenever we started Cartoonist Kayfabe, it was just like, well, you know, let's make it fun for us, you know, talk about comics we want to talk about, you know, subject that we're interested in. Part of the reason we started it was because we would go to conventions together and just talk comics all weekend, you know, on the ride there, at the convention, on the ride home. And we would always joke about like this, you know, this would be a podcast or something. And it just kind of sprung up like right time, right place. And then the rest of it is, we don't know exactly how this is going to go, but if it's fun to do it, you know, that'll sustain us until we kind of figure out what we're doing.
Right.
And, you know, I mean, it's kind of making art, you know, like I always just want to draw what I want to draw and, you know, do stories that I think are going to be fun to make. I try to apply that to as much in my life as I can. And a lot of stuff fits that, you know.
Yeah.
It's the reason we all started making art. And then at some point it becomes a job and you can get, you know, it can become overwhelming if you lose track of that fun part, I think.
And that's what that's my story right there. I got all wrapped up in it, lost track of the fun part, and now I'm getting back to it. But I mean, this podcast was born out of the same idea. I was like, I sit around at these conventions and like we'll all get together afterwards and have these really interesting conversations, and I felt like that's something I could do. I wanted to ask you, did you decide to do the Kickstarter before COVID hit?
No. The plan was I had two big books came out late last year and early this year. The Plain Janes, which was my young adult graphic novel, came out in January, I want to say. And then Street Angel, Deadliest Girl Alive came out in November last year. And so I had like a really full show schedule planned this year. You know, like I was going to be on the road a lot promoting those books.
Right.
And the plan was I was going to do Octobrion without anyone knowing, and then just show up with it at shows. So it would be like a surprise for, you know, people that came out to see me. And whenever COVID happened, you know, like we had already figured it out with the printer. We were just about ready to go with it whenever COVID shut everything down.
Okay.
And at that point it was like, you know, what to do. And Kickstarter I saw was like still going well in terms of, you know, people investing in the different projects, but they didn't have as many projects going up live. And so, you know, it just worked out. Like it just, all these things kind of happened almost at the same time. And it was weird to say perfect timing, but I had a finished project. It fit, it kind of fit because it's a comic book. It wasn't like a big 200-page book that I could really mess up,
Right.
if it didn't fund or something. It just seemed like it was a good size to try it out.
How has Kickstarter made you think more about how you're going to do things in the future at all? Like having such a successful Kickstarter?
Yeah, 100%. I think all the time about, if you follow my work, like I make some weird stuff, and I probably maybe don't always make the best business decisions. I'll make a book and then make a completely different book next. And what Kickstarter has done, this project, it's sort of like whatever I can think of, I feel like I can make anything now. Like I don't necessarily have to convince a publisher or compromise some part of it. It feels like I can just make whatever I want now. It could be a zine, it could be a book, whatever.
Right.
So I don't know, like if I'll do another one soon or when or what it'll be, but I love that it's one more option out there, options being traditional publishers, people I've worked with in the past, but also like, do it yourself. It's, I don't know. There's so many models for it. There's so many ways to make things now. It's incredible.
Yes. And I mean, there's like Kickstarter definitely, everything I've been going through has led me to realize how many options we have to be just totally free and independent with our work and fun.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yeah, there's so many outlets and so many ways to connect with like a readership now. It's really a fruitful time in that sense.
Yeah, I talked to one of the guys we talked to recently, Pat Mills from 2000 AD fame.
Oh, shit. Did you interview Pat?
Yeah, and he,
wow.
It'll be up tomorrow.
Oh,
and,
okay, nice. Wow.
He was talking about putting the reader first, and I think that people lose track of that. I don't always hear people having that conversation or saying that. Like thinking about your readers, but we are so close to them now. Howard Chaykin said something about that whenever we interviewed him, and this idea of like we're just more connected, I think, to our readers than we've ever been. And there's something great about that.
I agree.
It gives us a lot of freedom in terms of what we want to make, and just having that readership. It's incredible. It's very freeing.
Yeah. That's exactly how I'm feeling.
That's awesome.
Let me see what everyone's doing real quick. Let's take an art check-in. Mahfood, speak so I can see your thing.
Yeah.
Oh, shit, you're almost done.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Straight to ink. Octobriana posing with her weapons and a gun and a strange psychedelic skull over here.
That's so awesome, man.
It's like my warm-up for the day,
That's awesome. And
I can't believe how you can just go straight to ink like that. It's amazing.
It really is. It really is.
Sometimes this fails miserably, though. Sometimes it's not recommended for amateurs,
I was packing up an art book yesterday for a rapper friend, and I was like, let me do a little sketch on the outside like Jim would do, and I was lost at sea with this pen on this package. I was like, how the fuck does he do that?
Oh, yeah.
And then Jim Rugg. So Jim Rugg, I see you using a Raphael 8404.
Yes.
I am. What size do you like to use there?
This is a number 2.
Yeah,
I'll be honest though, I work with a lot of different stuff. Like I'm doing this partially because, I feel like your show is about inking sort of, or drawing with ink. So that's part of why I'm doing it this way.
Okay.
But I don't do a ton of inking. Like most of Octobrion I actually did with markers on a light box over the roughs.
Oh,
really?
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
So it really depends on the project. Like I knew how that project was going to go from early on in terms of like color and production. And so this step was just one step to get to like, the finishing point, which the color was such a big part of. So I drew it relatively quickly in that regard. but it rained, like it changes for everything I do. I did a bunch of Octobrion drawings for like different Kickstarter backers, and I did them with ink and markers and paint and ballpoint pens and pencils and colored pencils and stuff. So, I bounce around a lot with materials. Like that's one of the other things that has changed a lot since I started making comics is we can reproduce anything.
Yep.
And so I'm not that set on like black ink on paper as I used to be.
Right.
But I did for a long time love it, and I learned to use these brushes because I admired all these inkers. So it's still something I enjoy from time to time, but it's not I don't really have a standard way of working anymore.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's actually a question I wanted to ask you. So stylistically, do you approach every project differently? I mean, like Octobrion doesn't look at all like Street Angel to me.
Yeah, totally different. And if you have like the image collection of Street Angel, you'll see even those stories from story to story change. Some are in ink. One is completely digital from my iPad. Some are in pencil. So I like everything. So it depends on the story and it depends on my mood.
But like it almost like the hand that drew Octobrion looks different to me than the hand that drew Street Angel. Was that intentional? Do you see that?
I don't know if I see that much. It's a very graphic style, that blacklight style. So, I think stylistically it's very different than the Street Angel stuff, because the Street Angel stuff, it's a much more open line.
Right.
It's about, like the color. It's funny because they're both color projects, but the color is so different. The approach to color is so different between Street Angel and Octobrion. So, I mean, I don't know, I do bounce around style wise, but I drew it. So I kind of, like it feels like me to me, even. I mean,
reading it, it definitely feels like you. Yeah. I'm not saying it doesn't feel like you. It just, I was kind of like, wow, what a cool idea to like, I don't know if I'd have the balls to just flip it up like that, but that might just be me seeing that. And
some of it is probably based on the color. Like the black light effect, you really need. I think you really need a lot of black to make that work. And so it's a very heavy style in terms of how much ink is on a page. So, that might be where you're seeing a lot of difference, is that approach to like spotting blacks. And
that could be. And that's what I was going to ask you next, was that exact question. Because like as I'm working on this Octobrion piece, like I'd planned on doing a painting, and I was like, I want to kind of make sure the painting feels like it's set in the world that you created for this book. And then I've spent the past 3 days in my head, like, how the fuck am I going to paint this? I mean, I have some paints, like Holbein makes a color called opera, which is that pink that I see in the book. And I have the blues. I'm just, how do you decide how to do this and make it look cool or make it work? Was it just something you figured out on the fly? Like making those colors all work? Because I mean, I could see how that could go horribly wrong with all these bright fluorescent colors. Could create like a visual chaos that would be really difficult to read, but you did not do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's colored. I color it digitally, so it's pretty forgiving. Like unlike paint, I can color it, and if it doesn't work, I can get a sense that it's not working on the screen and very, very easily change that. Right. And make adjustments. And, I certainly did. It's funny if you kind of, I did a couple of other editions. I did one that's like retro color, right. And it's closely based on the blacklight, but you'll see like there are different spots where I'm changing colors, like I change colors, each time I would go through and proof it, I might be like, oh, you know what, that background should be different or the foreground should be different, so like. Right,
I noticed that.
It's certainly not an exact science.
Right.
You just kind of go with how you feel that day. And I think a lot of cartoonists are perfectionists, and I am too. I'm very obsessed with stuff that I'm not sure anybody even notices.
Right.
But I try to not be that way, because I think it leads to unhappiness.
Yeah.
And so with a lot of this stuff, I just, I understand that there isn't a right and wrong for how to color something like that. I mean, there might be something that's obviously wrong, but if you're killing yourself trying to decide between orange and pink, maybe move on.
Right. That's a good point. Let me actually, that's an interesting point you just raised. Perfection leads to unhappiness. Explain why you think that is.
Because of what I just said, there's just not a clear, the binary system of right, wrong, or this is perfect, this isn't. It doesn't apply to a lot of stuff, and it certainly doesn't apply to a lot in the art world. We're going to end up at the end of this episode with 3 cool-looking pieces of Octobrion that don't look at all alike. Right. And, you don't look at them and be like, well, Shawn did this part wrong and Jim did this part wrong or whatever. It's like there isn't a one answer for art, and if you're seeking perfection or whatever, that's what you're looking for is the right answer. Right. What happens if there's no right answer? Now what do you drive yourself crazy looking for this thing that doesn't exist.
Right. Do you feel like this is good? I don't know how I'm going to ask this, but do you feel like, true, there's no right or wrong answer, but for me, I guess this is the best way to put it. For me, the process and the journey of creating art for me is I have this idea in my head of what I really want to communicate and what I want to learn in the act of figuring out how to communicate that idea. And I've spent so many years with deadlines, getting in the way of that the joy for me does come from, I guess, trying to make it perfect is wrong. That's not it. But trying to get that vision in my head on paper, which takes time to figure out. So it's not so much trying to be perfect, but trying to get what you're seeing close to what's on the paper, I guess. And I don't know. I'm fucking.
That's always the ultimate challenge, though.
Right. But
I never get what I'm seeing in my head down on the paper. It just
it never gets there. But you know what I'm saying? You try to get as close as you can to it, and that's. I guess I was trying to understand the difference between trying to make it perfect and trying to carve that vision out as perfectly as you can. Because you're right, there is no perfect at all.
I think it's important to, I teach a little bit, so I'll see certain patterns repeated with students, and then of course I'll see them in myself and try to learn from that. And, that's where I would see a lot of these ideas that I'm talking about in terms of perfection. But I also tell people, I see people get frustrated whenever they try something new or they're trying to draw something and it doesn't look like, what's in their head, especially non-artists. If my wife draws something, she's so frustrated with it by the time she's done. And the drawing might be I might look at it and be like, that's a great drawing, but it's different than what she had in her head. And so she just sees that difference, and I think a lot of people do that. I think it's important to be able to assess what you make, because it's always going to be somewhat different. And, if you're a professional artist and you do this for 20, 30 years, you get pretty good at I have an idea in my head and then it turns out pretty similar. You know the tools, you've got your 10,000 hours in.
Right.
But I like that spontaneity, and, a lot of good stuff comes out of I don't know how to draw, this or that right, but I ended up drawing it. What I did draw looks cool or something, even though it doesn't look like the model of car that I imagined drawing here, but it looks like a fast car or something.
That's true.
So I think it's real important to look at that thing that you actually made as objectively as you can. Just because it's not exactly what your original concept was in your brain doesn't mean it's bad. It could be better.
Right.
You could be throwing out something great because it's not, what you thought of. You could be throwing out something better than what you thought of.
Right. That's a really solid point. Mahfood, I'm curious your thoughts on this too, because your work is so spontaneous.
Yeah. I actually enjoy the image not coming out like I imagine it in my mind, because that surprise, that spontaneity is sort of the whole point of the working process for me, you know? So
do you not, I mean, do you have a vision?
Yeah. And I mean, the most challenging thing for me is drawing, you know, the actual comic book pages, because that's the most preliminary work I put in, where it's like I'm writing it, I'm breaking it down, thumbnails, storyboarding, penciling it, then inking it. That's the most thought and pre-planning I have to put into my work. But like today, doing something like this, just pure fun, like kind of warm up style, drawing straight to ink. I really enjoy the not knowing where this is going or what the final image is supposed to be, or it just puts like way less pressure on myself.
Right.
But I also have a background of being a sketchbook worker. Like I've always been a sketchbook guy.
Right.
And certain artists just aren't sketchbook people, but I just came up in art school with, you just have a sketchbook with you everywhere you go, and I just always drew directly in ink in my sketchbooks and came up with concepts and techniques, and so that's kind of always been ingrained in my approach of like just make marks, just see where it goes, like just let it work itself out. And that idea, I think, could drive certain artists fucking crazy, you know, like that's too loose, that's too spontaneous, that's it's too abstract, you know.
I mean, I had like, it's something I'm trying to get back to. I spent a long time, many years, just always sketching in my sketchbook and experimenting. Jim Rugg, do you keep a sketchbook like that?
No, not really. I do keep a like a sketchbook, but it's much more of a notebook. It's I use it much more like a notebook than I do like a sketchbook. Although I do sketch a little bit in it, but usually just very like rough little layouts or something like that.
Is it for story ideas and stuff?
A lot more story ideas. A lot of just, you know, day to day, like my list of what I'm doing or what I need to do, or notes from a meeting and stuff like that. You know, like it's just a handy place to organize information for me. And I do sketch in it a little bit, but not, you know, like you see guys with these beautiful sketchbooks. That is not what I have. It's mostly illegible notes.
Let me ask you, because I see you were just working on the pants a little bit. Do you have a definitive design for Octobrion? Like, so like I remember some panels where she was in like these leopard skin pants, and then some where she wasn't.
Yeah, I do try to put her in snakeskin pants.
Yes, that's what. Yes, snakeskin. Yes, that's what it was.
But I don't have a particular like snake. I'm trying out a new snake pattern here today.
Okay.
Nice.
You know,
I mean, I asked because I want to put her in some. Well, go ahead.
One of the things that that Jim mentioned, you know, like all the planning and kind of stuff, I struggle with that sometimes, especially because, you know, like him, I usually do everything myself. So, you know, in the course of making a comics page, that means looking at it in rough form, thinking about it whenever I'm writing it or something, looking at it in roughs, looking at it in pencils, looking at it in inks and in colors, and it can get really tedious.
Right.
So, you know, the spontaneity or, you know, leaving some of this stuff out so that I can fill it in, you know, maybe when I'm inking or whatever, it's really helpful to me to stay engaged with it. You know, if it is like, if you saw my pencils, they're so rough. You know, they would make no sense if you handed them to an inker. They would just, you know, they would want paid to be a finisher or something because of how incomplete they are. But I kind of need that so that, you know, the fourth time over this page, I'm still interested.
I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. I could see that.
Yeah, it's interesting that everyone has their own approach to this kind of stuff, you know.
And by the way, my approach was different on the last book than it will be on the next one, and it was certainly different, you know, 5 years ago. And just from this conversation, like, you know, you pick up these little ideas that are like, oh, maybe I'll try that part out.
Right. So then, you mentioned briefly your process on Octobrion was you did some pretty rough, like would you call them thumbnails, and then you inked on a Lightbox right from those?
Yeah, I couple things. First, one of the things I'm putting together is a digital process zine that has every step of what I made in it. Okay. And right now it's 400 pages right now.
Oh, good.
So for that'll probably come out in a couple of weeks, but that'll answer in great detail any of these questions.
Okay.
But the way that I worked is I did my layouts on an iPad. I made like a template with in Photoshop, and that's what I would draw on, and that was just to keep all the sizes right and everything. And then I would very loosely do my layouts on my iPad and then print that out and then lightbox that. So, like it's very loose pencils, and I don't have them around here easily. Maybe if I get up, I'll grab some and show them to you.
Okay.
But they're very loose, depending on the information. Like whenever I pencil, it's kind of like, if I know how to draw whatever it is, like it might just be a line, like an outline or just to have the shape down. And then if it's something that's a little more complex, then I might pencil it a lot. There'll be a lot more information in my pencils then, so that I know what I'm doing when I get to ink. But I would print that out and I would lightbox it. And I really like the lightbox stuff. I started doing that with some of my Street Angel books, because I was drawing in pencil and I needed the pencils to be very clean.
Right.
And the way I would do it is lightbox. And there was something about that was very fun. So I've been using the lightbox more for that kind of thing. And that's what I would do my finished line work just over those rough layouts that I printed out. That's how I did Octobrion.
Okay. That was my next question. I was going to ask, how is it different than Street Angel? So with Street Angel, you would thumbnail and then pencil and then ink?
Yeah. Gosh, you're really testing me now, because the Street Angel stuff I would do, each issue I would do differently. But I would do some, I would get to a point where I had layout pencils, something with, again, enough information that I could do like the finished art. And then for some of them, I would lightbox them, with that like rough pencils, basically put a clean sheet on top, and then that's where I would do my finished drawing.
Okay.
And that was with pencil.
Okay.
Like if I'm inking, usually I'm like this, I usually have some marks on the page, like some pencils or something.
Okay. Where, Jim Rugg, let me ask you, where are you from? You live in the Pittsburgh area now, is that correct?
Yeah, I grew up near here, like an hour south of here. It was rural, but it's basically the same area, southwestern Pennsylvania.
Okay, because I hear in your voice an accent that sounds familiar to me. And because most of my life was spent outside of Baltimore. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I hear it's like in Philly, I hear it. In areas of Delaware, I hear it. And in Baltimore. And it changes a little bit, but there's some words that are unmistakably that area. That's what I was asking.
And Jim, you said you didn't have access to a comic shop as a kid, right? So you were just like a newsstand, grocery store kind of thing, kind of situation?
Drugstores, flea market is where I started finding stuff that was a little better than the spinner rack. Because there was a guy that was like the baseball card market had turned into like a comic book market. So I would find guys at a flea market that would have some decent stuff.
Nice. Okay.
Mahfood, you know all about those flea markets.
I love them.
You've told some good stories.
Oh man,
about your pops at the flea market.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've told these stories before, but St. Louis, where I grew up, like the comic convention we had. I say that like in quotations. It was just a swap meet style show, Oh,
so that was a convention you were talking about?
Yeah. But I mean, it really was it a convention?
Right. But I didn't even know what a convention was till I was like 20.
Yeah, I mean these were called the Colping House Convention, and it was just a St. Louis like swap meet at a Shriners Hall, Sundays only, like I think 4 times a year.
Wow.
And it was guys just set up with like, folding tables selling old comics.
But that's how conventions started. Like that's what they were.
Yeah.
I mean, my first convention I went to in DC was that.
Yeah, it was. But man, I mean, at the time I was collecting G.I. Joe and Ninja Turtles comics, and that's the place where I would find back issues of all that stuff.
Right.
And that's where, you know, my dad would be like the crazy guy and be negotiating. Jim, my dad used to like scare awkward, nerdy comic book kids at these shows and like can, you know, negotiate with them and get me these incredible deals on comics.
That's amazing, man.
You know, I would have like a stack of books that were like $50, and my dad would just like pop out of nowhere and grab the books and be like, we got $50 here of books. We'll give you $10 in cash for this right now. And the kid selling the comics would be like, but it's like 50. My dad's like, yeah, we're not paying that. We'll give you 10. And then they would start negotiating. And then they would finally give up, and I would get the books for like $20 as opposed to 50. So
man, that's amazing.
My dad was like a crazy. I mean, he's still alive. He's awesome, but he's a back in the day, he was a crazy Middle Eastern like salesman type guy, and his whole thing was like, you don't pay what they're asking, you negotiate. That's the whole point.
Right.
Like that's the whole point of this open market like swap meet thing is they list these prices and then you say no to all these prices. You just throw out your own like crazy ridiculous offer, and most of these guys were so awkward and uncomfortable by this like Middle Eastern man yelling at them that they would sort of give up halfway through the negotiation and be like, okay, 20, that's fine, whatever. And then they'd look at me like, just get your comics and your fucking crazy dad and get out of here. And so, dude, awesome. That's how I completed my collections, man, of G.I. Joe and the original Mirage Studios Ninja Turtles run, which, Jim, I know the Ninja Turtles especially have a soft spot in your heart, and Ed's as well.
Let me show you how near and dear they are to my heart.
Oh, shit. Oh, that's great. Is that brand new?
Yeah.
Wow, that looks... dude, show that again real quick. Real quick. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Oh, that's great, dude. It looks like you had so much fun doing that.
Very fun.
Yeah,
those characters are awesome to draw.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's fantastic, man. But you know, that was a specific era, and last time I was at home in St. Louis visiting my folks, most of my childhood comics collection is still in their basement, and I found all the original Ninja Turtles and Mirage stuff, man. Wow. I shipped it all back to Portland, so now I have it.
I'm trying to figure out where mine is right now. I remember getting Fish Police and Ninja Turtles.
Yeah. Fish Police.
Dude, I loved Fish Police. I would draw the shit out of that all day long.
It's so funny, the stuff that comics have produced over the years.
Jim Rugg, another question I wanted to ask you. Do you approach, I know we talked about like the style of drawing, but aside from that, the design of the storytelling, do you approach that differently from project to project? Because there are a lot of really interesting devices I thought you used in Octobrion that I don't think it's used before. Or do you sort of just approach it to like everything, just what feels right?
Probably kind of everything, you know, what feels right. Like that's what I love about comics is you can do almost anything. So it's almost like whatever I think of, if I think that'll look cool or that'll work or that'll solve some, you know, problem that I'm trying to, you know, make sure that readers see this or understand this or that.
Right.
You know, like pretty much anything's on the table most of the time, unless there's probably sometimes whenever I have more specific rules in mind, but for the most part, it's like anything goes. Because,
Gotcha.
like when I was a kid, I loved all the Marvel DC stuff. And then I got sick of that. And I found like all the alternative stuff. And then it was like all that and no Marvel DC stuff. And then at some point it was like, oh no, I still like looking at that.
Right.
And it just became like all my comics, like Street Angel, whenever it first came out, it was a combination of all these things that were like, part Frank Miller and then like part Dan Clowes or something.
Right.
And
right.
it was strange at the time, but now I feel like that's kind of where we're all at. It's just, whatever you're into, put it on the page.
Yeah, I agree. I think Jim and I have talked about this before, but I feel like creatively we're in one of the healthiest places I've seen comics in America be in.
Yeah.
And
anything goes. And I don't know if you guys watched the brand new sci-fi documentary on McFarlane.
I haven't seen it yet. It's on Sci-Fi Network, Tim?
What's that?
It's on Sci-Fi Network?
Yeah, but it's on YouTube as well, man. You can just...
Okay.
I mean, it's like an hour, but it was cool to hear even McFarlane, the Todd father, say, as far as talent goes, there's never been a better time than right now. Like,
right.
The amount of just sheer murderers that are working in the industry and posting on Instagram and doing their own thing. Like, the level of draftsmanship and just pure drawing skills is being pushed to like another level. I mean, just think of all of our friends we know, from like,
I know,
Canetti to Daniel Warren Johnson to Trad Moore to Ian Bertram to Mike Huddleston to the three of us, in this video. It's like there's some magical stuff going on right now.
I agree. I totally agree.
Yeah, and by the way, you can also then jump continents or go digital, web comics and stuff. It's happening everywhere. It's not like it's just American comics that are having this kind of incredible creative period. And it's not even just comics. I think it has to do, I think, with distribution and somehow with the internet and distribution. Because if you look at like stand-up comics, right, it used to be there'd be a couple of people that everybody would know, or you would all run out whenever something new came out. Now it's like, I don't know, there's 10,000 of if we really sat down and tried to name all the good cartoonists or all the talented artists we know, you'd have a list in the thousands. And in the 90s, it was like, there's 20, there's maybe 20, and we can all mostly agree on them.
I think it is the internet. It's absolutely. And I think the world is a much smaller place, and your work can reach an audience it never could have found in the 90s because of the internet. I mean, like, it used to be, I think you had to work for a publisher, and that's how the world saw your work. But then again, it was just people who went to the comic shop for the most part and saw it. Now with Instagram and the world's just so small, your work can reach some kid in Guam who's never picked up a comic before and never been in a comic shop. And
if you go back like 20 more years, it would be that you had to live in New York because, like even pre-FedEx, it was such a small pool of talent that would, Marvel or DC would have access to.
Yep.
Right.
And also back then, man, obviously before social media, email and all that, if you lived in New York and your face was a common sight at the Marvel and DC offices, that means probably more work for you. You needed to go to like lunch with these editors, mingle in that social circle, and just kind of remind people like, hey, I'm here, I'm working, I'm a freelancer, I'm around. You hear of old timers stories just like, I was just hanging out in the Marvel and DC office and someone asked to look at my work. And that led to some...
Thought I got his first job. I remember hearing that story.
Oh, yeah. And, just shit like that where it's like it mattered where you lived. I thought as a kid that I had to move to New York to work in comics. That was my...
I did too.
My goal. It's like when I grow up, I'm going to move to New York and work for Marvel or DC Comics. That's just how it works.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you probably had. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, just getting discovered not living in New York must have been so hard.
Yeah. Speaking of Howard Chaykin, was he part of that, like, Miller Sienkiewicz studio in New York, or is that Vermont? Am I getting
You're remembering correctly. On my, like, when I interviewed Howard on my podcast, we talked about all that, and like his peer group, which was those people.
Yeah, that studio that those guys, you know, and I think it changed over the years of who was there, but man, the guys that came through that studio, talk about a murderer's row of talent.
Oh, yeah.
If we were listing like our top 20 guys from then, I think they all went through that area. Because I think Bill Sienkiewicz was there at one point. You know, I think guys would come and go, so maybe they weren't all there at the same time. But man, a lot of talent through those
that generation
studio.
was crazy gifted generation.
It's probably a good thing, but just out of my curiosity, it's like it sucks in a way that there's no documented footage of a lot of that stuff. I mean, we all live on our phones and have video of everything now.
Right.
I remember when I was living in LA, I was at a drawing session with Sienkiewicz, and he was telling me that during Electra Assassin, when him and Frank were working on that, he went to LA for a while and was crashing out on Frank Miller's couch. And they were working on the book, going out partying every night.
What?
Coming home at night, and he would sit down and like rearrange panels and figure things out. And it was like him and Frank were in the same house for a period of that, making that book. And it's like, could you imagine if that had been documented, or if there was like video of that, and it's just kind of lost to the ages, and it's just Bill's memory basically of him.
But I feel like with podcasting, we can capture some of that.
Well, we can now.
Yeah. I think we need to.
But
go ahead.
I want to see what that was like in 85 or 86 of those madmen together, like making this crazy book together. That would be incredible, you know?
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite books. And
Me too.
whenever we've talked to Bill Sienkiewicz on the show, and I get the impression like whenever that thing came out, it wasn't maybe well received.
Yeah.
And it's almost like
really?
it scarred him or something. You know, because in my mind, it's this like, it's 1986, that, you know, like Pantheon year.
Right.
And that's one of those important books that has stood up and, you know, looks great.
That was 86 also?
Yeah.
Oh my God, dude. What didn't come out that year?
It's amazing. Like you're spot on, you know, thinking that's the time to document, or because it was almost like something was happening, you know, the fact that all these people were just hitting on all cylinders at that time. But I do think that book, history has changed. You know, like when it first came out, I think people had no idea what they were looking at, and were like, I don't know, man, this is weird.
Yeah.
Right.
It's interesting, Jim, because like Bill was telling me that I think he was disappointed in the format of it being released as a normal printed floppy comic by Epic Books. Like Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen seem to have different production value and the higher quality that square bound kind of prestige format that the original Dark Knight had. And
yeah,
I think Bill was a little disappointed by how Epic handled it. And then, yeah, the individual issues weren't really, the response wasn't quite there. And it wasn't until like a year or two later, or when it was finally collected, that people were like, this is a masterful piece of art. Like, this is fucking incredible.
It also
upon initial
to read it all at once. Like if you got that thing, you know, 2 issues in or whatever, you would be scratching your head, because it's such a graphic novel
Right.
You know, like that's a weird term, but I mean, like, it's impossible that you would read issue 3 of that and it would make sense. You know, like it really is a book, even if they published it as comics. You know, it's such a complete work as all 8 issues that it probably had to come out that way for people to, you know, have a little better understanding of what they were looking at and make sense of it.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Especially since, like, think of all the attention that Frank got for Dark Knight Returns that year. There's like articles in Rolling Stone magazine, and the mainstream press is sort of covering it. Like, comics aren't just for kids anymore. And then Electra Assassin isn't really included in that list that much for some reason. It's always Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, and then maybe sometimes Mouse is thrown in there as like the third breakthrough thing for that year, basically. But for me, man, it's like Electra Assassin is the most interesting of all of those for me, you know, visually.
I agree. That would be my, if I were going to read one of those right now, Electra Assassin would be my first choice.
Yeah.
I got to stick with Dark Knight Returns.
Yeah.
That's still, that was my entrance to this, and it's still my holy grail.
No, I get it, dude. It's still... Jim, Shawn and I did like a Dark Knight Returns episode where we did drawings of Dark Knight Returns while talking about, you know, the book, and
that's a good idea. That's awesome.
How good it is, and how it still stands up, like, just as this incredible.
Rereading it was such a treat.
Yeah, we did a review of it too on Cartoonist Kayfabe and Insane, you know, and also like just being able to talk to other fans of it is so much fun. Mm-hmm. I miss that. That was something that when I did get access to comic book shops was always the best, because, you know, like there weren't that many good books, so everybody kind of knew the same ones and had read them, or if something new came out, we'd all read the same thing at the same time. I miss that part, you know, like it's one of the trade-offs. Like if I were going to make this complaint, the complaint would be there's too much good stuff, which is ludicrous, but it does have an effect. You know, it's very rare that a book comes out and everybody, you know, like all my friends have read it, and, you know, people at the comic shop have read it, and you get into these conversations. So it's so great whenever we get to do that. That was one of my favorite things with Dark Knight recently, was just having a chance to reread it and then talk to somebody about it.
Oh yeah.
Was it just you and Ed talking about that?
Tom Scioli was there too.
Oh, okay.
He's a real fun guy to talk comics.
John, you have to watch the video, because Tom Scioli, no offense, Jim, but he sort of comes out as the star of that.
Oh yeah.
Of that video. He drops all these nuggets of wisdom and references and metaphors that are in the book that I never realized. All this strange psychosexual stuff with Batman and the Joker that I was like, wait, what? That is what that means. Oh my God. It's insane, and it's amazing. I had a blast watching those videos.
All right, I gotta watch it.
Yeah, it's great. Before I forget, Jim, I wanted to ask you, what was your first exposure to comic shops then? Like, how did that work out?
You know, it's probably around when Image started, and around that time, like I'm not sure the timing's exactly right, but I also got my driver's license, and so then I could go to one that was like maybe 45 minutes or an hour away.
Sure.
And the thing that did was, you know, at that point I was into indie comics, and that's where I found indie comics, because I would read about stuff like in Comic Scene magazine or something, but have no, you know, I'd never see it anywhere. And whenever I finally got to this comic shop, it was a pretty good comic shop, and they had everything. Like that's where I found Faust. It's where I would get like the Mirage Turtles, you know, whatever I had heard of, they pretty much had. And they were black, you know, like the black and white comics were so big to me because I had no idea how to color anything. I was just working in black and white, and it looked like what I was doing, and it was interesting, and it just really, I don't know, reignited, because, you know, I was kind of bored with the other stuff that I was seeing at that point, and it really kind of reignited it, because it was like, here's a whole new bunch of self-publishers and weird books and rule-breaking books, and it was huge.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it's man, that first time you walk into a store and it's just nothing but racks of comic books. Like
yeah, I remember that. God damn.
That was a special thing, man.
I remember it was walls and walls of, like, I'd never seen a long box before, and it was just like these stacks of these long boxes. And then realizing you could pull the lid off those and just dig through the crates like that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
What is this place?
Were you collecting, like, monthly comics at that time, Shawn?
Yeah, when I first started, like, I read Dark Knight Returns. I got into comics later. I was 15. Someone gave me a copy of Dark Knight Returns, and it just was like, whoa, what the fuck is this? I want more. And so I was in, like, Hebrew school at the time, and I remember, like, my best friend was a girl named Rachel, and her cousin was Ryan, and we were good friends. And Ryan was another artist who wanted to do comics, but Ryan knew comics. And I'd never even been to a comic shop. So he had just got his license, and we, like, got to Hebrew school, and he was like, let's go. And we cut, and he drove us like 20 minutes away to this comic shop. And that's where I discovered it. So yeah, I just started buying floppies, and the ones that I was interested in, I just stuck with. And that's when I learned about the pull box and all that stuff. So yeah, I kind of jumped right into it.
You cut Hebrew school to go to the comic shop? Jack Kirby would be so proud of you. Actually, Jack might be upset. Howard Chaykin would be very proud of you.
I got to tell Howard the story, because my dad comes to pick me up, and I get in the car, and he's like, how was Hebrew school today? I was like, it was boring, same as always. And he's just like, at this point, the rabbi had called him, so he knows, but he's a lawyer, so he's just giving me rope to hang myself with. And the more questions he asks, the more lies I'm telling. And then he's like, actually, we have to go back. And then he walks me back to the rabbi's office, and the gig was up.
That's hilarious.
Shit.
Oh, man. But,
yeah, I don't know if I've told this story or not somewhere, probably, but I would get comics, like, wherever I could find them. You know, it was like I was like a fiend or an addict or something, and I would find, like, listings in a newspaper. And whenever I got Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss, it was like I was 16, and I would just drive all over the place, like people's garages and stuff. And so I got to this place, and it was kind of a bad section of the town that I lived near. And up in this dude's attic, and he's selling me Howard Chaykin's Black Kiss. And I had no idea. I'm just looking through this long box, you know, and shouldn't have been there. Probably shouldn't have survived it. But it all worked out okay. But it could not have been a more lurid place to find that comic.
Right.
Seems like the perfect place to find it.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow. He's like, hey, I also got Faust comics kit. You're like, I already know about that. I have to go. Yeah.
I remember the first time I saw Faust. That was a mind blower.
Yeah. That was just another dimension, you know, because it was one thing to have, like, the mainstream turn into the hyper detailed, like, McFarlane, Liefeld, Lee era of the early 90s. And then I was kicking it with, you know, Lorenzo and the Artline Studios guys in St. Louis, and they were all older than me. So I couldn't buy Faust, but Lorenzo would buy it. And then I would see these comics, like, in the back of the comic shop. He would just break it out and show it to me, and I'd be like, this is fucking crazy that this exists. Like, I saw Faust comics before I saw Robert Crumb.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, really, if you...
I think I did too.
But if you understand the legacy of, like, lurid, adults-only comics, it makes sense to start with Crumb and 60s underground kind of hippie stuff. It's like drugs, sex, you get it. But to not know any of that and then just go directly into Faust, where, like, people are getting their dicks cut off.
Right.
disemboweled, and it's this gorgeous, incredibly detailed rendered drawing. It's hypnotizing and also like completely disturbing at the same time.
Totally.
So
one of my favorite things is hearing that everybody knows Faust. You know, like whenever that would start to come up in conversation with other cartoonists, and like every cartoonist knows that book. It just blew my mind how much that book got around.
Yeah.
Dude, I haven't told this story, I don't think, ever. So when I was 17, like my senior year of high school, my girlfriend got a job in a comic shop. And she would just rape the place and bring me stacks of everything. And that Faust was in that.
Hell yeah.
Got into my Faust.
That's a pretty wild way to get Faust, like having your girlfriend give it to you.
I know. I still don't know what she was doing in a comic shop.
So, yeah, I was going to ask, like, did you actually dated a comics?
No, she got the job because of my interest in it.
Okay.
Like she was.
Did you marry her? That sounds like a.
No, she didn't really read them. She was like a hot chick who worked in a comic shop. She got a lot of attention, and she wanted to be an artist, and she knew that like I like showed her all the comics and all the art and stuff, and I don't know. I guess I don't know why she decided to apply there, but she did. You know what it was? She was working in. I know exactly what it was. Now I remember. She was working in Express, the clothing store, and like I would go visit her during lunch break, and then I'd be like, "Let's stop in the comic shop," because it was in the mall. And then like they got to know us from popping in, and the manager definitely crushed on her. And I think like one day she went in there to pick up my books, and he offered her like, "Hey, if you ever want to work here," and then I think he offered her a lot more than Express was paying her. I think that's what it was, if memory serves.
So this is like early 90s, late 80s, early 90s?
Late 80s, yeah.
Wow, Express, dude. I haven't thought about that since remember the mall? That was a huge, I mean, especially in the Midwest where I grew up, the mall was like the big thing, man. That was
for sure where I was too, no doubt.
Yeah, same. It was always great whenever during a speculator boom, like there would be shops would open in the mall, and that was the best, having access, just more comic shops everywhere. But it was always convenient when they were in a mall.
And that's exactly what this shop was. It was that boom. And then it all collapsed later. But yeah, it was in the mall. And I still have it. I think it's in my attic here. Like the entire Marvel card set with the holograms and everything.
Oh yeah.
She got me all that shit.
Is that the one that there's a set that Jim Lee like drew every card, right?
That's the X-Men card.
Okay.
X-Men set, and that's a cool set. I think he inked them with like Sharpie markers or something.
Yes.
Almost like the two-sided Sharpie, that has the finer tip on one side.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Because
those are great.
I remember me and my friends at the time being such nerds that we were like, Scott Williams didn't ink these. It's just Jim Lee. But the fact that he inked them himself and with just kind of like that dead line, it's just like not really much line weight. I still like that style of his a lot. I
don't think I've seen these.
I thought that was a cool look for him. And it's like, if this is Jim Lee rushing things, he's still a bad motherfucker. Like he's still amazing.
Like all of his drawing outside of comics better than I like his comics work.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like my thought on Jim is he's a great artist. I hate his aesthetic.
Yeah, it's very tight, and I think that's deliberate. I mean, obviously it's super popular. If you're going to hire Jim Lee, that's what you're hiring him for. But man, the stuff that he does, like on somebody's drum kit or warm-ups or, like these videos of like sketching and drawing, he's phenomenal. Like, it's so much more interesting to me than that really tight. And I get it, again, people love it and it sells, but personally, like, I love seeing his other, more out there stuff.
Me too. And even in the heyday of that look and Jim being like the like hot X-Men artist, he was not my favorite in that school of artists at all.
Yeah, me either. It's weird to say that it's too good, but I like the weird stuff, and I kind of need. I don't want perfect art, like if it's too accurate or whatever, it's kind of boring to me.
Yeah.
So, okay, this is an interesting conversation. Does Art Adams' work interest you at all?
Yeah, I like his stuff pretty good, but I don't think of his is that perfect. It's very he has cartoony elements. I like that stuff.
All right. I understand what you mean by perfect now. Okay, I got it. Cool.
It's the same with all those like 80s black and white indie comics. Like the more competent you are in a way, the less interesting the comics are.
Yeah. It's like that certain amateurish aesthetic makes the work more charming in a way, or more interesting. You know?
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, I could definitely see.
And also, as a young artist looking at that kind of stuff, it lets you know that you can do this shit one day. You can. If this guy can do it, it's like, well, I'm not too far away from this. What else do I have to do to get to just this level?
Yeah, I think that a lot. Like, where maybe part of the reason I like it is inspiring because it looks like I could do it.
Right. I don't mean that in an arrogant way either. I just mean...
Yeah, I know what you mean. I totally know what you mean.
In a practical way.
It's like hearing like the Ramones and saying, I could make music.
Right.
That's exactly right. I was going to say it's very much like punk, where it's like anybody can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Jim, one of the things I like when you guys talk on Kayfabe about the Image era, you've mentioned it in different videos where you guys say one of the coolest things about the Liefeld McFarlane era, especially Liefeld, is that work looks like the work of the best kid in your high school class.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's inspiring because it's like, well, wait a minute. I think I can do that. Like, I probably can't draw like Neil Adams, but this new batch of weirdos doing this hyper liney, detailed work with incorrect anatomy. It's like this resonates more with a younger teenage kind of angst-ridden wannabe cartoonist,
Right.
Yeah, I think that's part of the, like, their inking even has that quality because it looks like it's done with a pen or something.
Yeah.
The brush being this exotic,
That's true.
perfect line tool, but their stuff was like, oh yeah, man, I can do this. I can do this with my Uniball or whatever. I think that's I stand by that. I think that's part of that work.
It's funny because, like, hearing you guys talk, like, I went in such the other direction where I was like, I have to learn how to use the brush. I have to like seeing that people were using like microns and pens and stuff made me not want to use them because I don't know. I wanted to take the harder route to get that look, I guess.
Right.
That I was more.
Shawn, that happened to me once I got to art school, where I was like, okay, I want to learn the proper way to do all this, the brush and everything.
Right.
In high school, it was sort of like, hey, if Liefeld can do it, like maybe all of us can do it in a way.
Right.
It just seemed more attainable.
I wish I could. Yeah, I get it. I'm trying to remember. Like, I think I thought Liefeld was a really good artist back then. Like, I mean, I loved McFarlane. I liked Liefeld a lot. I can't say I loved him. But I was really into the work of like what Mark Silvestri and Dan Green were doing at Marvel.
Yeah, I like those guys a lot.
Yeah, that's some really pretty stuff. And Art Adams was my favorite. Like everything he did, like when he did that Fantastic Four run where it was like Hulk, Wolverine, Ghost Rider, and Spider-Man were the FF.
That's a great run.
Blew my mind. All the X-Men annuals and the Mojo stories they did, like Art Adams was like the holy grail.
Yeah.
So I don't think I saw the flaws in Liefeld's work until like college when I was starting to study art more.
Right.
I think that's
and then it's just like, wait a minute, what is this stuff? This is what were we thinking when we were like 15?
Right, that's exactly right. Do you guys remember seeing Mignola's work for the first time?
I remember him doing that fill-in on X-Force and not appreciating it.
That's exactly how I felt too. Yeah.
I was a fan of Mike's before that because I was collecting DC stuff in the 80s. So he did some fill-in issues on like Superman, where it was like Superman versus the Banshee.
Yeah.
And then I bought Cosmic Odyssey when it came out.
Dude, that book. Oh my God.
That book just blew my mind because it was so strange. Like I didn't understand that it was Mignola doing like a Kirby thing.
Right.
But it was just so cool looking that I had to get it at the time. And Mignola was controversial between me and my friends because some people just didn't like his work. One of my buddies was like, he always draws people with big, like, fat faces. And like he would do like a top and bottom lip on the male character.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
And at the time, a lot of mainstream comic artists just weren't doing that. So even back then, Mignola had his own language for his style, even though he wasn't really inking his own stuff.
For sure.
At that time, he had already developed like this sort of language that he was doing.
That's for sure. Dude, it's funny. Today, Jim, I was picking out, I just was collecting pencils for what we're going to do on Tuesday.
Yeah.
I started to come across like a He-Man he drew, and it was like the most unglamorous, like unsexy He-Man. I'm like, only Mike would do this. And then I got to like his Spider-Man villains, and they were all like so wonderfully and oddly proportioned.
For sure, yeah.
And it made me, that's kind of why I asked the question, because I remember seeing that X-Force issue and being like, huh? But now I'm like, oh my God, it's so charming. I love it.
Oh, it's great.
That's an incredible issue.
And it's so
there are layouts for Rob Liefeld did layouts for that issue, and you can find those online, which I always found pretty interesting because it looks like Mignola's, it looks like he's doing everything, but it's pretty faithful to the layouts. And where it differs from the layouts, it's very interesting to see that too. Because for the most part, it's like Liefeld was, is giving him the storytelling part of it.
Wow,
that's just crazy to think about.
Yeah,
it's weird.
That's really weird.
It's like, do Mignola purists know about that? Do they know that?
I don't know.
Mike stuck true to Rob Liefeld layouts. It's an incredible thing to think about.
Funny to refer to them as purists.
Yeah, I like the idea.
Purists.
There's this group of Mignola purists. I like that.
They're out there. I mean, it's ironic too, man, because I consider Mike to be one of the best like storytellers. Yeah. So him having to follow anyone's layouts, much less Liefeld, is sort of
that's crazy to me.
Like laughable if you think about it now.
Yeah,
I think that's probably just how how Liefeld was writing that book at the time.
Oh, right.
I guess. I don't know. It's neat though, and like I said, you can find them online, so you can do the comparison for yourself, and it's just kind of cool to see all of that. Like it's a funny mashup. Do you guys have the Hellboy in Hell artist edition?
No.
I do not.
Oh man, I'm so glad I brought this up. Then, well, you should rush out and get it.
Okay,
it's great.
that one's.
Here's what's so great about it. It's not, the lettering's not on the boards, so it's this wordless version of Hellboy in Hell, and it reminds me of like Jim Woodring's Frank. Where it's just Hellboy wandering through these incredible landscapes of hell, and it's so good in black and white. The thing that I never understand about how he works is that he's able to get 3 layers of depth with black and white.
Yeah.
Right? It's very peculiar.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which artist edition it was, Jim, but I saw, I think, a different one that Mignola did with Hellboy, and it was fantastic, but his originals are so clean and precise that it was almost like it didn't need an artist edition, because what you see is what you get. If that makes sense. Like with my artist edition, I want to see the white out, the painting, the mistakes, and with Mignola, it's like, well, these pages are all perfect. It's just
right.
It's just in black and white. Like, I mean, this is cool, but he's so good that I'm not seeing like all of the hidden magic necessarily. But I have not seen the Hellboy in Hell one. I'll check that one out. That sounds awesome.
Well, you know what? I saw his pages before that book came out. Like before the book came out, I was somewhere and he had pages, so we were looking at them, and it's a very thin ink that he like spots the blacks with. At least if my memory's right on these pages, anyway. And the artist edition, it looks like they've maybe increased the levels so that it is more of a flat black rather than like seeing like the wash, kind of the wash like fill. And that bothers me, but purely as like a comic book, it's my favorite version of Hellboy in Hell. Like it reads in that format with no words and in black and white, and it's just this gorgeous. It's also like at scale, there's something powerful about his work at that full scale. Like it's almost like it's like the ideal size for it or something. I don't know. I was pretty impressed with it. Usually I'm like you, Jim. I want to see all the blemishes and, you know, secrets and marks and stuff. But this one is almost like, think of it as a graphic novel rather than an artist edition. And it's just a pleasure to sort of read, you know, compared to like, you know, like the Mazzucchelli Daredevil was amazing for looking at process.
I love that one.
It's very different to Hellboy in Hell, but it's its own thing, and it's pretty spectacular for that part.
I've got the Screw On Head artist edition, and in that Jim Rugg, you can see all the like the thin inks, like the almost like washy look of everything. And I mean, talking along those lines, like I won't even use an ink like that. Like Jim, you like my originals look like the page, like they're the same thing.
Oh yeah.
That's my obsessive craziness.
There was a Jack Kirby artist edition that Mike Royer inked. It might have been the first one. It was like a New Gods, I think. And I had that reaction of, it looks like photocopies. Like Mike Royer's, so, you know, his inking was so precise.
Right.
But it's very flat blacks and super clean. Nice to look at, but not like the artist edition quality of, you know, weird discolorations and
for sure. I mean, if it was up to me, I would own every single artist edition that's been made. It just becomes a money issue and a storage issue with those things.
Yeah.
I mean, most of them are all so beautiful. It's like, you don't have to twist my arm to get me to go get that. It's just what section of my house do I need to build a new wing onto to store all these artist edition books?
Right.
Man, I hear that.
I still have to get those Kelly Jones ones that you have, Mahfood.
Oh yeah, Jim Rugg. If you haven't seen it, the Kelly Jones Batman artist edition is out of this world.
I haven't seen that one. I'll have to look
nuts, for it. Man. When you look at it in that format, it's John Beatty inking Kelly Jones when they and to think that was a monthly Batman comic in the mid 90s.
It's incredible.
It's unbelievable, dude. It's like completely surreal. Like some of it's super psychedelic, crazy proportions, but it looks like they're having a blast drawing this stuff. I always show it to people that come over to visit, and it freaks everybody out.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
It's like crazy shit.
That's cool. I need to come over and look at it.
Anytime, man. It sucks because, dude, I was planning on going to Pittsburgh this year just to hit all the comic shops out there and do some digging, see you guys, go to Ed's house and do the official on set, on location interview with Kayfabe.
Yes.
And then, obviously we're in the place we're at, but it's still on my list, man, because I only been to Pittsburgh once, and it was when we were on the set of Dogma.
Oh, yeah, we'd love to have you, man. Hopefully all these stores survive.
Yeah. I'm still going to the comic shop once a week out here in Portland because there's so many of them out here that I love and want to support. I know you're super busy with the Kickstarter. The stuff is still open, at least in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, most of it's still open. I don't go out very much for anywhere, but it's none of the big stores have closed.
Yeah.
The local big stores. So I don't know how well they're all doing, but they are all still, fighting the good fight.
Definitely.
And a lot of them are doing online sales and stuff like that. So I have bought stuff from them that way.
That's cool.
Jim Rugg, I wanted to ask you, because you started off the show, and I remember I made a note of this, saying you have a lot of love for comic shops. And we've kind of talked about them a little bit throughout this show. What are your feelings on, what is it you have a lot of love for, and what are your feelings on right now, I think what's happening right now with COVID is it's accelerating problems that were already there, and we're seeing the shops starting to disappear possibly from this.
Yeah. What's the question there, Shawn?
The question is, is evolution killing the comic shop? And I know we have a nostalgia for that, but is this something that you think evolution will take, the evolution of this industry and this medium, we'll see it disappear? And what do you feel about that?
Man, I hate to say that, but probably. I think the model of comic shops is not going to work for a million reasons. Earlier when I was saying there's too much good stuff, that's a real problem if you're a retailer, because what do you order? And then, if I show up and I'm looking for whatever book and they don't have it, and I leave, I find that book somewhere else. And so I think that there's just a lot of challenges facing comic shops. I even think thinking about them as a unit is even a mistake, because early on, when Diamond was shut down and there were a bunch of, conversations about that, I remember seeing a stat that I think it's 10%, or no, it's 10 stores. The top 10 stores account for, I think, more than half of the direct market, business-wise. So if there are 2,000 stores and 10 of them do, as much business as the other 1,990, it's weird to even think of those two groups as the same thing. They just aren't the same. So, we've all been to lots of comic shops. They're all very different. Every shop I've ever been to is totally different. Mm-hmm. They're like these entrepreneurial businesses. And I think some of them will survive and adapt. And some of them maybe will just, be done with it. I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting to see how it goes. Mark Miller's written a lot of, or talked a lot about what he sees in the near future, and he expects the comics industry to really be strong a year from now, but much smaller. Many fewer titles and things. And he's basing this on like the history of comics. There are like 10-year cycles, and of like kind of creative boom and then contraction or whatever.
Right.
And he feels like we're on the cusp of that next real big creative positive period. And I like hearing that. And I mean, there's so many good cartoonists working. There's so many good books coming out. Figuring out how to sell them is a challenge, but if you have the good material, I think the model for selling it will emerge. But it'll probably be different. It'll be a lot of different little models, like Kickstarter, like one of the best comic shops I know of is Copacetic Comics here in Pittsburgh. They don't have a diamond account, and it's still like the best comic shop in the world.
Really?
So he buys from Ingram's, he buys from all these different sources, he buys from creators and small distros and stuff, and he knows what he's selling really well. So people come in and he's able to very quickly talk with them and point you at stuff that you don't even know existed until you walk through the door. So I think there are other stores like that. Who knows? I don't know really anything about retail, so it's hard for me to say too much about this and actually know what I'm talking about. I just don't.
Right. But that's amazing, man. His model, Copacetic, that should be the model for...
Yeah, that's really amazing to hear.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah, it does.
Wow. Well, and Mark is partially right, because I'm sure you guys heard this week, like DC fired all these people, and what they're doing though is they're killing half their line of comics because no one's buying this shit.
Right.
So what's going to happen? It's going to go back to like the 80s again, where it's like there's only one or two Batman titles, there's one or two Superman titles. They have to trim all this fat because sure, people dig Batman, but do you really need 14 Batman titles every month? No, that's stupid. It's fucking greedy. It's
right.
Like, get rid of this shit, give Batman 2 really great books and have it be that. That's it. That's all you need.
Right.
Yeah, I wondered, Daniel Warren Johnson is doing that Dead Earth Wonder Woman series. Yeah. And it's fantastic, man. He's great and it's great.
It's really
but in my mind, it's like, why isn't this Wonder Woman? Why isn't this just, 6 issues of Wonder Woman or whatever?
Right.
It's a good question.
Because it's incredible when you think like Batman Year One was 4 issues of Batman.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Born Again was just, however many issues of Daredevil.
Right. It's, if your books aren't selling well, like, put the best efforts into those books, put these miniseries and stuff that are really good and do seem to have, traction, put those into the regular books.
Yes. And, it's interesting, man, because, like, I know the corporate people probably cringe at that idea, but at the same time, if it's just Daniel Warren on the regular Wonder Woman title, it's only 6 issues. If it doesn't do great,
right,
6 issues are up, you bring in a fan favorite artist, and then they're happy again. But at least you're experimenting, trying new things, seeing what happens. But again, that's us as artists talking. I know corporate people, when they hear like experimenting and this and that, they're like, no, we don't do that. Like,
right. That's
crazy talk. But
I wonder a lot about the whole comic book format, because it's a pretty obsolete format. It exists because it was the cheapest way to put this stuff out. It hasn't been cheap forever. It hasn't been like a good economic model. It's just like momentum or, clinging to what was rather than adapting. So there might be room for that to change in some way. Sure. You could still do comics when they make sense. Like with Octobrion, I love comics. I love that format. So here's a story that fits that format. It's 24 pages. It fits a comic book. But if it were 200 pages, like, I'd probably just do it as a book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mahfood and I, we've talked about this a lot.
Yeah. Trying to figure out like just format and approaches for the future. And I mean, I'm working on a new Girl Scout series. It won't be done until next year, but it's one thing Shawn and I always talk about. It's like, I don't even know if should I just kickstart this thing when it's completely done next year and sell it directly to my fans? Should I still go through Image? Is the direct market, do they want this kind of book? Like, we have options, which is exciting, but it's also kind of like, how do I read the landscape of what's going on and do what's best for my work and getting it out there? It's kind of interesting,
It's weird that we have these conversations as much as we do now, too, because nobody talked about this stuff 20 years ago.
No.
Around me, at least.
Right.
And,
not at all.
Like now, it gives us a lot of creative freedom. When we talked to Ralph Bakshi, that was something that he talked about because, like his work is so unique and singular, but it's because he controlled everything. He delivered on time. He worked within whatever budget he had. It was like being in control of the business side of it allowed him to be super creative.
Right.
And I feel like that's been my experience making stuff, but it is different. Like it does take time away from sitting at the drawing table,
Right. You have to be a business person too.
Yeah. Or you have to have a good business person somewhere on the team with you.
Right.
I don't know, man. Like I said, I don't know that there's going to be one answer for any of these questions. I think it's really going to vary from publisher to artist to stores. I think it's going to be a lot of, maybe a lot of just options for everybody. And then, readers can decide if they want it on their iPad, if they want it as issues, if they want it as graphic novels, whatever.
My thought for like my first independent creator-owned book is I'm interested in the idea of putting out chapters as like comics for your phone, but collecting the entire story at the end in a nice, beautifully packaged, like oversized book.
Yeah.
One idea. I like that idea.
Yeah, and people engage with this stuff in a lot of different ways. Like there are people who are only going to read it on a phone, and there are people that will only read it on paper. It's not, it's not like an either or. It's kind of like
exactly.
I like that part a lot. The idea that you can package this stuff in these different ways, and with print on demand and all the different things that are out there. It's not like you have to have a 40,000 print run for something to be profitable.
Right, exactly. And I do think like with like something like Kickstarter, like the idea that we can cut out the publisher means we don't have to sell as many units to make some decent money doing this.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of like the sky is the limit. It's just figuring out where you, as an individual creator, fit into all this,
Right.
But I mean, we all did Kickstarters this year, and they were all successful. So I think that's a step in the right direction. Like that's a good sign.
For sure, I agree. Definitely agree. All right, so where are you guys in your pieces? Because I've got a lot of work I'm going to have to do after the podcast on this one.
I think I'm about done.
Oh, that looks great.
Awesome. Oh,
Those are both looking amazing.
Thrown up on there. Nice. And Jim, what are you starting? Mahfood, you're starting a new piece?
starting a second piece. I have this so far.
That's unbelievable, man.
This is like my crazy mixed media.
Now I want you to do an Octobrion comic. I want to see the whole story of this.
If you write it, man. Collaboration for 2022.
Yeah, maybe
you heard it here first.
Do it like an anthology, an Octobrion anthology.
Oh shit, that's an idea.
Yeah, I thought about there was a lot of dreaming going on with the Kickstarter, and one of them was trying to get other artists to do blacklight stuff with me because it's kind of a weird process.
Yeah,
but Yeah, I just didn't. I kind of ran out of time, but that was in my list of things that would have been cool to do. So there may be more in the future.
All right.
I'd be into that, man. That's a whole. Yeah, it's like you're introducing a whole new printing technique, and that can be fun with deciding how you approach the work. You know.
Yeah, I like that. I like that aspect of the book too.
That's awesome.
It was a lot of fun. All right, Mahfood, before we cut out of here, is there anything you were hoping we'd ask Jim while he was here? Or you feel like we covered it?
I think we covered a lot of good territory, man. I just had a blast hanging out with you guys drawing. This is
definitely
my Saturday warm-up drawing, and you know.
All right, cool. Jim Rugg, is there anything you were hoping we'd talk about that we did not?
You know what, man? It went pretty well. Like Jim, this is fun. I don't do a lot of this, drawing with people on video like this. So it was very, very good. I appreciate it, man. Thank you.
All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. So you can't say where people can get Octobrion right now, right? That's not available. That's going to take.
They can order it right now at their comic shops because it is in previews now. So that would be the best place to go. Otherwise, they can just kind of follow me. I'm Jim Rugg Art on Instagram, and I will certainly post as soon as it's available anywhere else.
Okay, awesome. All right, so I'm going to hit stop on the record real quick, and then we can chat a little bit and say our goodbyes personally.
Sure.
Thank you so much for doing this, Jim. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks for having me, Shawn. This is awesome.
Awesome.
This is the Inkpulp podcast. This is the Inkpulp podcast. Comics, hip hop, life.